Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you've all recovered from the first three sessions. We had a lot of entertainment, I was going to say, a lot of information for you in those. And it can be a lot to digest. If you have questions, as always, I said, get in touch with us. But hopefully it hasn't been too much of an overload up to now. So the first few sessions, we talked about the general whole environment of online information and indeed disinformation. And then we talked again about looking at content itself. So things like confirming or debunking, and then actually going and searching for these things. So today we're going to move on to something that's slightly different, which is looking at the sources of information and trying to see where these things come from, how you can try to get closer to originals, how you can possibly get in touch with the people creating these things and ask them questions and get a little bit closer in that way to figuring out whether stuff is authentic, what the motivations behind it are, and so on. So the title of this session is going to be the who and why of online info. And the why, you will find, sometimes can be just as important as the who, because the motivations behind why somebody is posting something can be very important. Now, before we go into this, we did set a little bit of an exercise the last day on the digging for information. Before I go into a couple of example solutions here, one thing I need to constantly clarify is, and Trina did make this point in our previous session, that these things will not always work the way we expect them to. An awful lot can depend on your own browser history, your browser settings, your privacy settings in your social media, and so on. So if you tried these out and they didn't exactly work the way you wanted them to, do consider trying them in different ways with settings changed. I'll show you a little example of it in a moment. But the first thing we wanted to do was to find a presentation mentioning COVID on a Philippines government website. Now, the first thing to do is figure out, well, what is the domain that the Philippines government use? So you can simply just Google search for Philippines government. This will bring up a couple of sites, and you'll see that they're .gov.ph. So that's where we want to target our searches. So that's the first part of our search. It'll be site, : remember, no space, this is very important, then .gov.ph. The next thing we're looking for is a file type. We did say we wanted to find a presentation. Now, I've tried here file type : again, no space, and PPT for PowerPoint, because we're looking for a presentation. When I did that search, though, and I put in COVID then, because we want things with the keyword COVID in them, and I didn't get anything. Now, something you will find quite common is that a lot of these presentations, Trina did mention it before, that you can have different file name endings or file type endings for the same kind of thing. So you could have the same thing for documents with two different kinds of endings. You could have two different kinds of endings for spreadsheets, and in this case, for presentations. And what I found tends to be more common, I don't know whether part of that is because these are being created maybe on Google or something, which generally saves them with this ending, but PPTX, I find, tends to get me better results than simply using PPT. So in this case, we changed that PPT to PPTX, ran the search again, and suddenly we have lots of results. So now you have all these. You can see the little label on the right, and it says PPT, so just denoting that these are presentations. And you can see a whole host of different presentations with the word COVID somewhere in them. Of course, you could narrow this down a lot further. You could have COVID research, you could have COVID vaccinations and other things. But for the purposes of this exercise, to keep it simple, we just wanted anything with COVID in it. Now, if you do look at the addresses at the top of each of these results, you will see that there's nnc.gov.ph, there's congress.gov.ph, there's dbm.gov.ph. So we're using the top level domain ending, which is gov.ph. So any website that is basically a subdomain of this, or anything that has this as its ending, to keep it in simple terms. Even if it's different government websites, you will still get them through this kind of search. Now, the next thing we asked you to do was just a little practice with Twitter Explorer. Use Twitter Explorer to find out what is currently being mentioned on Twitter in connection with the #MeToo hashtag. So you need to sign into Twitter for this. Once you do, it's quite straightforward. You just put your search term in the box at the top there. You can select languages. You don't have to. You'll still get lots of results. And you hit the little magnifying glass for search. So you put #MeToo in there. And this is what I got. Now, I did this a few weeks ago when I was preparing these slides. So the results you will have got doing it in the past couple of days will, of course, be somewhat different to mine. But the point of this is helping you to see what is being discussed using that term or that hashtag #MeToo. And you can see a whole lot of different things there. It says child brides, legalized sexual abuse. There are a couple of names of people there. That doesn't impute any nefarious purposes to these people. They just happen to be mentioned in these tweets. They could well be people making policies against abuse and things like that. But the point we were using the last day was using this in helping you to search for things. So sometimes you will see, well, people who are mentioning #MeToo in their tweets are also mentioning these other things. You can then test out a couple of those things, try using them as search terms, and add them to your set of searches. Now, the next one you may have had kind of hit and miss results on. The point Trina did make was telling you that, with particularly the Facebook searches and the Facebook third-party search tools, they do come and go in terms of effectiveness and in terms of efficiency, because Facebook is constantly making changes to its algorithm that sometimes basically break these tools. Some of the people who create these third-party tools are very determined, very committed, very tenacious, and they will try making tweaks and getting the tools working again. And depending on when you use these, you may have better or worse results. So don't be frustrated if you tried this exercise and you didn't get something satisfactory from it, because it is constantly, it's like the goalposts are constantly moving here. But basically, if you look at it here, you want to find mentions of AstraZeneca on Facebook on April 21st, 2021. Now, you could have gone in and used the Facebook native search function, but that only allows you to narrow it down to 2021. You can see in this case, I happen to be lucky, and the one at the top there is April 21st, but the ones below it, they were all over the place. So you would have to get very lucky, and you might get one from the date you wanted and lots of other dates, or you might even get none from the dates you wanted. So the best thing to do if you're looking for something specific is to go to Who Posted What, which Trina introduced to you the last day and give you a link to. So I hope you've all got that. It is straightforward. It's a single word, whopostedwhat.com. So when you go to that tool, you can then get this calendar function and you can set whatever date you want on it. And once you go to that, you need to be logged into Facebook as well, because it will only perform the search on a logged in account. But when you hit search and you go to that, here you see suddenly all the results are from April 21st. And like I say, you may not have got this. There can be numerous reasons for that. One of them could be Facebook itself making changes and tweaks. But here's what I get sometimes. And it says, we didn't find any results. Now, if you look up at the top left there, you'll see a little circle with FBP in it. This is a tool. It's a browser add-on called Facebook Purity. And it's similar to an ad blocker. It gives you a lot of privacy tweaks and settings that, for me, in general day-to-day use, improves my experience on Facebook. It blocks out a lot of stuff I don't want to look at, but for some reason it seems to break the functions of who posted what, and I never get any results when I'm using that. It could also depend on your own privacy settings in your Facebook account. So just the most important point here is not, oh, the tool works or the tool doesn't work. The most important point is, if you don't find anything, do not use that to lead you into the assumption that there is nothing on Facebook on that date about this subject. It's simply telling you you can't find it. And there could be a multitude of reasons why you can't find it. You can try other ways. You can try tweaking your settings. You can, like I did, turn off that browser extension temporarily. And these things may work. But the most important thing is not to use it as proof that something is not there. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about original content being important. Now, when you find content online these days, unfortunately, it's a lot harder to find originals than it used to be. And we've mentioned this previously. Why is that? The biggest reason, more than anything else, has been the rise of private messaging platforms, things like WhatsApp, Telegram, KakaoTalk, Line, and all these. Because it used to be a lot easier to just put in the link to, say, a YouTube video and search Twitter or Facebook and find the earliest one you could. And more often than not, this was the person who had created and uploaded it. Now, unfortunately, the technology, the improvements in technology have worked against us rather than in our favor, because something may have bounced around the private messaging sphere for a long, long time through multiple groups, who knows how many people's private feeds, long, long before it ever makes it to the public-facing internet. So that is unfortunate. It's something we just have to work with, though. This is constantly a process and of coping and trying to adjust our footing to keep up with changes that are not necessarily always any good for us. But why should you try to find originals wherever possible? Well, the first one I mentioned here, of course, is if you're working for a publication or an agency or someone like that, and you actually want to use the content online, you should always get the permission, if possible, of the person who posted. Now, you don't have to legally, and there are, distinctions here. Because, for example, if you're embedding something directly and that then goes back to the person's original account or channel, then you're allowed to do that. But if you want to put it in a proprietary player on your own platform, excuse me, my dog is wandering around in the background. If you want to change it in any way, if you want to edit it, then you need to get specific permission. So that's the first one. We will talk more about the whole mechanism and the whole process of getting permission when we do our session on ethics, because I think it's something that's very important. What's legally permissible and what's ethically permissible may not always coincide directly. The next one, of course, is verification, because naturally it is easier to verify something if you can trace it back to its origin. And even better if you can contact the person responsible for it, because you will be able to ask them questions. Now, any of you who have dabbled or worked in investigative journalism know that if you're approaching somebody trying to confirm whether something is true or not, and you ask them 10 questions, you probably know the answers to 9 of those questions, and you're trying to establish trust and authenticity before hitting them with the one that will bring your investigation further on. So it is good to investigate these things as deeply as possible before you start asking people questions about them. The third point I make here is that knowing the source of a piece of content and then finding out as much about them as you can will help you to evaluate their motivation, whether they have a bias, a prejudice, an agenda, or anything else that may be a distorting factor for the actual content. Are they producing this for a specific reason? We talked about these reasons previously. You know, are they trying to make money from it? Are they trying to raise hate against specific groups or anything like that? So it's important to try to know why people are creating these things and why people are disseminating these things, because that will help you a lot in figuring out the authenticity or the aims. So looking at these kind of things and what's authentic and what's not authentic, I think we've all seen these kind of channels, and it's pretty obvious quite quickly. If you took part in our first phase of this project, you will have seen we did a short session including some of this kind of information. But you look at this channel, and it's called World's Most Amazing Trending Videos. You have a Bollywood star, you have some guy climbing up on a building risking his life, you have a shark, you have a typhoon, and all these things. And clearly, either this person has an extremely exciting life, which I don't think it's that likely that it could be this exciting, or they're taking videos from elsewhere and posting them on their own channel. This is what we refer to as scraping. Now, don't confuse that with scraping in the sense that it's used by data journalists who talk about scraping statistics and numbers and data. Scraping in this sense, we mean people taking content that is not their own, reposting it to their own channels, and not attributing it to the original owner. So scrapers very often will do this kind of thing, and it's quite easy often to recognize and to pick out what they're doing. You'll see this kind of thing a lot. You see the caption there, "You wouldn't believe this if it wasn't recorded," or it'll say things like, "I bet you can't watch this without laughing," and so on. And then you will get the exhortations, which we see there on the screen, to like the video, to share it with your friends and family, or to subscribe to the channel to get more of this amazing content, and so on. And these are things, again, we talked about motivations previously. These are a dead giveaway. What is the motivation here? They want to get more hits, more eyeballs, more clicks. It's monetized content. Therefore, the motivation here is money. So when you evaluate uploaders of content, these are the kind of things you need to be looking at. These are the basics, at least. First of all, trying to pick out things like that. Is there an obvious financial motivation? Is this person posting this because they want to make money? Whether directly by trying to sell you something or indirectly by getting a big monetized, having a big monetized presence and getting regular viewers and so on. Is this person motivated by money? Because of course, that's always distortion. If there's the possibility of making lots of money, this can tempt people into doing things that are not authentic. Next thing we're looking for is consistency, both internal and external. When I talk about internal consistency, I'm talking about looking at the content on a channel. And if, like that one we just looked at, the content is so completely different from one video to the next and seems to come from all over the world and from really different kinds of incidents and so on, well, that's not a good sign. That clearly tells you that this person is probably taking the content from elsewhere. Then what I refer to as external consistency is corroboration from other sources. So if you were to go out your door now and see a tornado barreling down the street, and you might take out your phone and get a few seconds of video and post online, would you expect to go onto Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or any other platform later and not see anybody else tweeting content or even a mention of this? Now, if you were the only person in a very remote area, okay. But if you're in a built-up area, everybody has phones these days. Everybody has an internet connection. You would expect to see it elsewhere. So if you do see something that appears to be very, very dramatic and very outstanding, and yet it's only mentioned or posted one place online, then you have reason to be suspicious about whether it's real or not. Then finally, in this quick checklist, I mentioned checking for other online accounts. And we'll see in a moment why that can be important and helpful. But it's good to know whether that person is elsewhere online also. So here's an example. This person, and again, if you joined our short videos, you will have seen this. This person is a beauty and lifestyle blogger from Thailand. And like many of us these days, she's not on just one account online. I'm certain that if I asked you, everybody here obviously has some kind of online presence. But if I were to ask you, is there anyone here who's only on one platform online? I'm quite certain the answer would be no. Everyone's on more than one thing. So here you see this person, and she's got an Instagram account. She's also on, this is Twitter. Then she's on Facebook. She's on Pinterest. That's YouTube. Then TikTok, of course. And has a blog, and even has a Vimeo account. Now, you'll see that she doesn't actually have any content on the Vimeo account, but she still does have a couple of little bits of information about herself. And this can be important. Sometimes people join these services and never actually use them, but they do post maybe little bits of profile information. So finding as many of these as possible is always going to be useful. Because what tends to happen is people tend to post different little bits of information about themselves on their different platforms. So they might have their email address on their YouTube profile information. They might have a phone number on their blog or somewhere else. So the more of these you can find, the better. Now, you can go to all the online platforms you can think of and try to find this person on them. But this is a useful kind of shortcut. To use one of these username search services. These were not produced with our purposes or uses in mind. They're generally kind of marketing tools. So you set up, say, a new company or a new presence online, and you want to grab that name on as many platforms as you can. So nobody can impersonate you. Nobody can infringe on your corporate image or whatever. These tools are a nice shortcut because you put in a username. Don't put in a real name because it doesn't recognize spaces. But you put in a username into one of these services, and it instantly goes across the internet looking for platforms and seeing whether this username is already being used on them. Now, if it shows you that this is being used on other platforms, you don't take that immediately to say this person is on all these platforms, because more than one person could be using a username. But what you would do then is go to each of those platforms and investigate, see if the same avatar is there, if some of the same photos or some of the same profile information is there. And this will help you know if it's the same person and whether you can add this to your social profile or social audit. Now, when I did that, I found this person had another Facebook account. And this time, it gave her actual name on it. So immediately that gave me something else to search if I wanted to find out more about this person. Then when I searched her using this actual name rather than the nickname, that brought me to her LinkedIn. So again, there were, it goes step by step. It goes on from one to the next, and it allows you to find these things little by little. Now, another thing that's important is evaluating Twitter accounts, because there is a lot of disinformation and a lot of fake presences out there on Twitter. There's been research to say that, I don't know the exact numbers now, but that a huge proportion of Twitter is not actually genuine people. It's automated accounts, it's bots, trolls, and so on. So very often, dramatic information will come out first on Twitter. More so than I think, really, than in my own experience, more so than other platforms. So you need to look carefully at Twitter and at the accounts that are sharing these kind of things. So some of the things you can look at to try to get an idea of whether it's authentic or not. First of all, look for when an account was set up, because something that's quite common is people setting up inauthentic accounts specifically to spread disinformation or specifically to run disinformation campaigns or influence campaigns. So if you're looking at something very dramatic that happened on an account and you find that the account was just set up yesterday or last week, then you need to be suspicious. There was a guy called, there still is a guy, but a guy called Tommaso De Benedetti. He's an Italian journalist, and he would do this thing quite regularly, where he would open a new account and he would fake somebody's online presence. And once he got a little bit of attention, he would then put out some very dramatic information. And sometimes he did this to show how media and how people in general are quite gullible when it comes to sharing things that they see online, that they can believe things very easily. So he would do this quite regularly and catch people out quite often as well. The next thing you need to look at whether profile photos are original. I know we do have this thing now, which we've talked about before, about how very convincing photos can be just created artificially. And more we're seeing examples. I tweeted about an example recently of where somebody followed me and I was able to find, because I suspected it was a computer generated photo, I was able to be suspicious and then find out that this was not an actual real person. But quite often what happens is that when people set up these kind of fake accounts, they will just steal a photo from elsewhere. I know of one network of accounts that were all retweeting each other's stuff and trying to push certain causes, and they all looked like attractive young women. So obviously trying to get a bit of interest in that way. They were all taken from the same modeling agency's website. So very often, fakers can be a little bit lazy. They can be in a little bit of a hurry, and they will just take a whole lot of stuff from one place. There was a big scandal in my own home country, Ireland, recently, where a journalist was found to have been running or involved in the running of a fake Twitter account, and that used a stock photo from somewhere as its profile picture. Also, try checking earlier tweets, because with some of these accounts, you'll see that they seem to be tweeting about very serious and very dramatic and important issues. But then if you go back a few days or a few weeks, you'll find they were tweeting about something entirely different. They might have been even tweeting jokes and comedy and so on. And again, that's the kind of internal consistency I was talking about. Does the timeline of somebody's tweets, does it have any consistency about it, or is it jumping over and back? It can be a sign that somebody is, that tweets are being automated and just random things are going out there. Or it could also be a sign that it was a genuine account and that it has been compromised or hacked and turned to new purposes. Now, you look for patterns also. Look at the kind of things that people are talking about on their social media, particularly on their Twitter accounts. Do they seem to have an obvious political bias or an ethnic or a sectarian agenda that will make you suspicious then about everything that they post? So look out for that kind of thing. Have they an agenda? Have they a particular affiliation? Is there somebody they support strongly? Because obviously that can color their approach to information. And then the thing we already mentioned, are there links to other social profiles? Because again, you can see if this same person has a Twitter account and then has, say, an Instagram account, and there's a huge inconsistency between what's being posted on both, does that mean possibly that their Twitter account has been compromised? Now, one of the things you can use for all this, of course, and Trina introduced the other day, was Twitter Advanced Search, because you can look at the kind of things people are talking about. When I mentioned agenda or affiliation, watch for hashtags, watch for keywords for controversial issues, and see, are they mentioning these kind of things? Then things like this, who are they interacting with? Because you can go to Twitter Advanced Search and you can see who people are tweeting to, who they're being tweeted at from, who they're mentioning in their accounts. And this can very often give you an idea of networks, people who are working together on a specific information or disinformation campaign. So watch who people are interacting with. Then the date function can be helpful, because if you have, for example, a specific controversial issue and you're thinking this person may be involved with it, look at previous dates when this issue was in the news and see what they were saying about it, if they were saying anything about it at that time. And, being able to go back to certain dates. Did something happen on, for example, April 10th? What did they say about it? Did they engage with it? Again, this can give you an idea of agenda or affiliation. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of tools that will help you to analyze people's Twitter accounts. The important thing is that you need to have a Twitter account and be logged in, because in order to give these tools access to Twitter, you have to allow them through your own account. The first one is simply called Account Analysis. It's a very good tool. It's very simple. It's very intuitive. It's run by a German guy I know called Luca Hammer, who's a really good guy and is very conscientious about things like privacy and security. So you don't have to worry about using this or granting it permission, because he's very conscious of those kind of things. Now, it's quite straightforward and simple to use, but it does give you a lot of information. And if you look at it here, you'll see a few things. It's organized nicely into these little boxes on the screen. You can scroll down to the next parts of it. But here's just the first you see, there's daily rhythm. What time of day are people tweeting? What time of day is this account tweeting? And this was something that was used at times to uncover disinformation campaigns, because, for example, there was a well-known troll factory where people were being paid and employed to tweet about certain issues and in certain ways. And if you looked at the daily rhythm, you could see where this was located, and that the people were generally tweeting roughly from about 9 to 5 on weekdays. So they had very regular work hours. And then after 5 p.m. or after 6 p.m. or on Saturdays and Sundays, the volume of tweets would drop off. And there were a whole network of these accounts that it was going in exactly the same way. So it's, it's not confirmation, but it gives you justified suspicion that these people are being employed to do this. You see it here. It also talks about the date and the day of the week. This is, if you look at my account here, you will see roughly the times that I'm tweeting most, the days that I'm tweeting most. Then it says what type of tweets, whether they're just basic tweets, whether they're self-replies, retweets, quotes, and so on. Because something you will notice about automated or inauthentic accounts is that very often they're entirely retweets and maybe some replies. So there's not a lot of authentic activity going on there. They may be set to reply when certain subjects are mentioned and so on. It shows you what language the tweets are generally using, which interface they're using. So is the holder of this account tweeting through their phone? Are they on twitter.com and so on? Then the hashtags, the URLs people are putting into their tweets and so on. And this again can be an indicator of agenda or motivation. Are people constantly harping on one thing? You can see from my account there, the hashtag I use most often is disinformation. Then over the past year, COVID-19 has been a lot, misinformation, open source intelligence, and so on. So you can see that I have a specific aim with this account. The URL I have posted most often in tweets is the URL of my own website, because obviously I'm trying to help people find tools and services they can use. So very often I'm pointing them toward my website where they can find them. Then there are a couple of links to Medium, because I run a blog on that also, and other presences that are connected with this whole world of online investigation. Then down below, you can see the people I engage with. And if you go and look at any of these people, you'll see that they're almost all people who work in the same field. And these are the people I'm replying to, I'm retweeting, I'm quoting, and so on. And one of the things I like about this account is how simple the interface is and how clean it is. And if you look up here at the top right, there's this little toggle switch there. And maybe it could be a bit more obvious what it does, but use that the first time you go to this site. And when you toggle it to the on position, you immediately get explanations there as to what each section of this does and how you can use it. So you don't have to go to each section trying to switch on the information on it. You switch it all on with that switch. And when you're finished, you switch it off again. And you've got the nice clean interface once again. This is another one I've been using quite a lot recently and testing out quite a lot. It does very similar things to account analysis. Again, lovely clean interface. This is all you see when you get to the home page and you put in the Twitter username and you hit analyze. And here's an analysis of the Alliance of Independent Journalists in Indonesia. Some people I've done a lot of work with, fantastic people if you get the chance to look at this. And it does an analysis of their Twitter account. I like it because it gives a lot of information in a very clean interface. There are one or two things that I think could be better about it. It is working really well. As far as I'm aware, journalists from Deutsche Welle, the big German news agency, are helping out with direction on this, telling them this is the kind of things journalists need. This is the kind of things that would be helpful. And the people creating it are listening and putting that into effect. Now, I did say there were a couple of things that I think could be better at the moment. This is great, but it's not labeled clearly as to what it does. If you're used to this kind of stuff, then you'll know. You look at that, and what it does, if you just click on that button, it will instantly do a reverse image search of the avatar, the profile picture, or the background picture. So it's a very handy thing to have. It immediately opens up in a new tab, and you can check whether these images come up elsewhere. But it should be a little bit more clearly labeled, I think. The other one that I find slightly concerning is the bot indicator. To be fair, it does work pretty well, because you can see here it's saying there's 0% possibility that the AGI account is a bot. But it does throw up these couple of flags. And I do find people tend to very often look for automated solutions on stuff and to put a little bit too much trust in them. Because you can see these flags that have come up here, and one of them says false time zone, and the other one says spam. Now, I think I know why false time zone is there, because this account is clearly based in Indonesia. And Truthnest is finding that a lot of the tweets are coming out probably very late at night, outside normal waking or working hours. Now, I believe this is because the people in AGI work very hard and they don't get much time to dedicate to the Twitter account until they finish work and get home. So that's quite possibly the reason that the false time zone is coming up. The other one is the spam flag. And when you look into that, Truthnest About page explains to you that if it's constantly putting the same URL out there in its tweets, then it will flag it as spam. And this happens with my account. It also gets the spam account because I constantly tweet links to my own website. But then the whole point of my Twitter account is just another way of getting people to go and find the good stuff on the website. Now, in fairness, like I said, it does say 0% bot possibility, but just be wary. Don't let these false time zone and spam flags influence you. Tweetbeaver is another one that I've used for quite a long time. It's very simple, but it is powerful. And one of the things you can see here is that it allows you to download a lot of the information. So you can download things in a couple of different formats, into CSV, for example. And this will give you a lot of information and you'll be able to collate and collect it. Spoonbill is one of my favorite. It is very simple. It only does one thing, but it does it very well. And it says here that Spoonbill lets you see profile changes from the people you follow on Twitter. Now, that's true, but it's only part of what it does. Because actually, Spoonbill lets you see profile changes from anyone on Twitter. You just have to know how to do it. It's not made obvious on Spoonbill's homepage. So if people have made changes to their Twitter profile, Spoonbill will almost certainly have recorded those changes. And normally it says, please log in to find out profile changes from the people you follow on Twitter. But I was playing around with this tool a couple of years ago, and I discovered that you could do much more than that. Just discovered it by chance while tinkering about with the tool. And I later asked the guy in charge of it, a guy called Justin Duke, the creator of it, was it all right to tell people about this? And he said, absolutely fine. So for a while, it was only if you were attending my workshops, you were getting this little bit of a secret tip. But I've tweeted about it since, and I've mentioned other places. And Justin is fine with that. So for accounts you are not following, you enter this in the browser address bar. You put in spoonbill.io/Twitter/data/ and not the word username, but the actual username of the Twitter account. I did have someone contact me once and said, I went to that link and I got a 404 error page, but they had just actually put username there. And apparently there was nobody on Twitter called username. So do put in the actual username. For example, if you're looking for my account, spoonbill.io, Twitter, data, OSINT Essentials. And if there have been changes, it should show you. Now, I say you don't need to sign in. You don't need to create an account on Spoonbill, but it's one of the few services where I think it's very worthwhile doing so. And you will almost never hear me saying sign up for the email because we all have far too much email in our inboxes. But this is one where I find it actually worthwhile. I've signed up for the daily email. And that's what happens there is it creates a digest of any accounts that I am actually following on Twitter. And I get a digest every day of changes that had been made to the profile information of those accounts. It can be useful. It can tell you sometimes if somebody has changed their job, if they've suddenly taken an interest in some particular issue, if they're involved in a campaign of some kind or whatever. It's almost like a little psychological exercise trying to figure out why people have made certain changes to their Twitter accounts. Then a little trick here. It's still working. It's been like this for years. It's not working for everybody, but for quite a few accounts, it does. If you're desperately looking for somebody and you only have their Twitter account, there's a way you can possibly find their email address. So you go to twitter.com, not logged in, or if you are logged in, you log out. And instead of going to log in, you click on Forgot Password. Then you put in the name of the Twitter account, the username, and you hit search. And what does Twitter do? It asks you, do you want to reset your password? And it says, we found the following information. Do you want us to email a link to this email address? Now, it doesn't give you the full email address, but it redacts it. But unlike some services, which will by default just put in 3 asterisks, this one puts in the exact right amount. And I think with this account, it's quite easy to guess the email. It won't always be that easy. I use a throwaway email account for mine. So if somebody looks at it, they're not going to guess what it is. But in many cases, you will look at it and say, okay, count the asterisks. Is it this? Yes, it obviously is. So it can be a helpful way of getting hold of somebody's email address. Then this size, Hunter, is also quite helpful because if you know where somebody works or if you know a website that they may be connected with, you can put in that domain and it will scour the internet and try to find anything that looks like an email address connected to that domain. So, for example, the great people at Boom in India, who I've done quite a bit of work with, and they're amazing people. Check out their website. I just put their website address in here, boomlive.in, and it shows you a number of emails that are connected to that. If you know any of the people there, you can probably guess who a few of these are. But it also tries to figure out whether there's a regular protocol for creating email addresses. Many of you will know when you went to work somewhere, you were told, this is your email address for our company. It's your first name, dot, your last name, and the name of the company. So many companies and many online services try to have a regular, consistent protocol. So in this case, you'll see it says the most common pattern is first@boomlive.in. If you do sign up for this, there's a paid account, but there's also a limited free service. If you are signed up and signed in, it will take away that little blur there and it will give you the full email. And it also will give you 100 free searches per month, which I think for most of us is plenty and probably more than we need. And also gives you more results on that page. Now, I always say to people that when people say to me, what are the best, most important tools if we want to do investigative stuff on online content? And I'm not joking when I say stubbornness and creativity are the most important things, because you can learn all the others. This is something you have to cultivate and keep as part of your arsenal all the time. You have to look at things from different angles, try to find different entry points. So this is a very simple one. Don't forget when you go to these kind of accounts or channels, you have to check the about, profile, and bio sections, because that is where most of the information will be. You see, this is the home section of this guy's account. Go to the about page and you can get his email address. The next one, back to simple things. Use search engines to search for names or usernames. This will very often bring stuff up for you. Always remember to check the comments and descriptions. You might find information in there. You can see in this case, somebody from an agency reaching out and the person says, can you give me a call? Here's my phone number. Now, just to let you know, I haven't put that person's phone number out here. This is something I made up specifically just for the presentation. I'm not in the habit of putting people's phone numbers out in public. Don't forget to reverse image search photos. So background images, avatars, profile images, all of these kind of things, because people will very often recycle and reuse the same images across their different online presences and the platforms they're on. So if you find the profile image on one account, you may well be able to reverse image search it and find their other accounts. Don't forget to look through people's other information as well, or their other posts on the same account. Scroll back and see, do they mention where they work? Do they mention where they go to school or anything else? Or do they have photos that show uniforms or badges? Or in this case, this guy who was involved in he was one of the people who entered the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C. in January and wore his work lanyard to it. And a lot of people were immediately able to figure out, or very quickly able to figure out, where he worked. Probably not a good idea when you're involved in an illegal demonstration. Now, before we take any questions, I want to give you an example here. The example and the things here are not specific. I'm not saying you should do these things every time. It's more an example of an approach, the kind of things that you could be looking out for, the kind of things that can help you, the kind of ways of thinking that can help you. This is from last year when a United States Navy ship caught fire in a shipyard in San Diego, and there were some injuries. I can't remember whether there were deaths, but it was quite a big newsworthy incident. And this person posted video of it on Instagram. And I thought, oh, I wonder, can I find this person? So I was looking at it first, and I got to the profile, and it said Annette CHAPAF and Annette F down below. So there are certain hunches you might get from this, but it doesn't give you an awful lot of information immediately. So among the many things you could have done, one of the things I started to do was going back, scrolling through some other stuff on the Instagram account. And I was looking through it, and this one caught my eye because there was a hashtag that said becoming Faraball. And I saw that said Annette CHAPAF. And it did say on her account page, it did say Annette F. So I thought, hey, I wonder if that F stands for Faraball. So I went to Google and I just searched Annette Faraball. And you can see I got quite a few results. None of them were in California on the first page. There were some in Indiana. There was a doctor there. But looking down at the images, somebody looked quite familiar. And you see this lady on the left here. And there she is again on the Instagram feed. So clearly we're on the right track here. We're looking at the same person in a couple of instances. And if you just actually go into the images tab on the search result, you can see she turns up again and again. That's her in the first 3 pictures there. So you can then look at some of these. And she's in another picture down below as well. But it does mention somebody called Chapa, CHAPA. And that was part of the Instagram profile as well. So now we have a little bit more to go on. It was Annette Chapa F. So now we Google and we try Annette Chapa Faraball. And a couple of things come up from Facebook. And they're not a Facebook account belonging to this person, but you can see where she has actually commented on somebody else's Facebook content. And it turns out somebody's dog had died, had passed. And you can see here that she has commented on it. Of course, when somebody has a comment left like that, you can then click on their name or their profile photo, and that will take you to their Facebook page. So we're getting more links, more connections, and as we go along, more information about this person. You can see that that Facebook page belongs to the same person who owns the Instagram account, because if you look at the profile photo there, it's exactly the same photo that has been posted on Instagram. Another thing I did was looked for this person, Annette C. Faraball, and set the location as San Diego. Now, a lot of these kind of people search accounts, they work best if you're looking for somebody who's in the United States. I look for people in Europe, and it fails most of the time simply because privacy laws are much tighter here. But with this account, eventually, because I knew she was Annette Chapa Faraball, and there were quite a few Annette Faraballs on the site, but I was able to narrow it down to this one. She's in San Diego, and I was able to find her telephone number, which I've blocked out here. But eventually, so there I had suddenly a way I could contact her and ask her some questions. So what you can see here is you're following different little threads. You're pulling at them one by one and seeing if you get anything. And like I say, it's so important to be stubborn and to try to be imaginative and think, well, this piece of information I have right now, what does it tell me? What else can it lead me on to? And you try to build a picture. You have to try to stay organized also. Otherwise, you end up like I used to be when I was doing my thesis. You look in the footnotes of a book, it leads you on to another book, and you find yourself going down this rabbit warren of research. So do try to keep things organized as you go along, because it's terrible to find something like that and then not realize how you got there. So with this woman, I eventually did also find, and this came from the Google image search as well, that she was a business director at a company. And again, if I hadn't got her own personal phone number, I could always have tried calling the company and getting in touch with her in that way. And I have found as a journalist that when you call people like this, as long as you're honest and explain to them why you're calling them, how you got their information, the public tend to be very friendly more often than not. Then if you are looking for ideas on how to go searching for these things, I'm not a programmer, so it's not very pretty, but it works. This is a tool that I created, and it's available on my website. There's a link to it there. This is basically like a little cheat sheet or a tip sheet. You go through different kinds of information. What is the entry point? What's the piece of information you have? Is it a name, a username, an email address, a photo, a video, or so on? And you put the mouse over that on the left, and on the right, it will pop up with some tips. What should you do next? So it's just something that over years of training people and of doing this work myself, trying to find out what would be helpful to get people, to kickstart people in their investigations. And this is what I was able to come up with. Like I say, it's quite simple, but it should help you organize your thoughts and organize your approach. So these are some things for you to try yourself. And there are no right answers to these, obviously. Well, there are right answers, but they will vary from one person to the next. And the first thing I want you to do is take a username. It could be your own username. It could be somebody well-known, a celebrity. It could be a friend. It could be me. But just take a username from somebody's Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever other account they have, and see how many platforms you can find this being used on. We've had funny results with this before, because I've had people search their own names and then realize they had signed up to so many services in the past and forgotten about most of them, sometimes with really bad passwords. So it can be helpful to find what you've been doing yourself also. I do remember somebody being found on Tinder as well, which they were slightly embarrassed about at the time. But so try this out, and try it with anybody you want. Then the next one is choose a Twitter account, go to Truthnest, and find the first tweet from this account, and find the hashtag that it has tweeted the most. And then the last thing I want to do is go to Elon Musk's Twitter profile, the real one, not one of the hundreds of fake ones out there, and find out what the 3 most recent changes to his profile are. And I think you can guess from what we've just done what the best way of doing that is. Now, we've got about 10 minutes left for any questions you may have. And I think I'll bring Trina in here as well, because Trina may well have contributions on this. I know she's used many of these tools and techniques over the past few years. So if you do have any questions, put them into the comments section here, and we'll try to get to all of them. As ever, like I say, if questions occur to you later, get in touch with us. If you have logistical questions, you can see the email here for the organizers. You can see my contact details, just in case you think of a question at 4 o'clock in the morning or next week or next month. You please always feel free to contact me and ask me. And then if you would, it would be great if you could do us a favor by sending feedback on these sessions. We always want to hear what we could be doing better, what people liked, what they found particularly helpful, and so on. And of course, if you fill in the feedback form, you get the tip sheet as well.
Hi there. So we do have a question, but the question is rather incomplete. So perhaps, Vivek, if you're still watching, you could elaborate. What do you mean? What sort of advice are you looking for a business news website? We also have, Owen, perhaps you can pull up the next slide, which is the clinic hour. So I know most people actually end up watching the recorded session instead of the live session. So if you're watching the recording of this, and obviously you wouldn't be able to click on the chat or the comment section anymore because it's already over. If you're watching a recorded session of this, we do have a live clinic hour which you can sign up for. There are 2 sessions in July, 1st and 5th. So you can sign up for the clinic hour if after watching the recording of this workshop and you realize that you have questions about the content that we've been teaching for, say, the last 4 workshops and the upcoming 2 ones, and you want to talk to the trainers. So you can actually sign up for the clinic hour, and we'll have an interactive closed door session where we can answer all your questions. Or perhaps you can go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
So Vivek, I'm not sure if you're still there. I don't know what sort of advice you're looking for a business news website.
Also, if you have forgotten what the question you wanted to ask was and you think of it later, please do get in touch.
Yeah, so we're just gonna put a call out. If there are any questions, please send it in the comments section. We'll give it another minute to see if anyone sends in anything. I think for me personally, I find that account analysis, Tweetbeaver, and Truthnest a bit tricky to use. I don't know if this is something that Owen you come across whenever you teach these workshops.
Which the account analysis tool, or just the whole process of
account analysis, Truthnest, and Tweetbeaver. So I realized that it takes a bit of figuring out on how to use them.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your purposes for using them actually are, because sometimes people will go to one of those tools and say, "Oh, I want to see if this account is real or fake," and it's not that simple. You know, there's no big red button you can push that will tell you if an account is real or fake. Those tools will gather a lot of information for you, which you will then have to analyze by yourself, using all the other kinds of knowledge and information that we've talked about. You know, what tendencies do these accounts show, and so on. You know, who have they been interacting with? What have they been talking about? What have they been linking to? Now, these will give you that information. How you digest and analyze that information and what use you decide to put it to will be very subjective from one journalist or one person to the next.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to look back at the slide to see if there's any other things that needs to be clarified. Perhaps we can also show how Spoonbill works.
Yeah, let me put it up there then.
Since we have a few minutes left, we can just show how Spoonbill works.
Yeah, let me just grab a tab then that I can put it into. Okay, just give me a second. So if, for example, I wanted to just get a better, fuller screen here. So if I wanted to look at, for example, recent changes to my account, I've already got it in there, actually. So if you see at the top what I've got in there, it says spoonbill.io/Twitter/data/ and here's the name of my Twitter account.
Could you enlarge it? Sorry, Owen, can you enlarge it because it's appearing quite small on the display screen?
Okay, I'll just full screen that then.
Yeah, but the fonts are still small. Could you zoom in?
Okay. So,
yep.
So you'll see here the link that I already gave in the slide was spoonbill.io/Twitter/data/ and then the username, and then you hit enter. And you will see here that it goes to that account and it checks out things. Now there is a little nag screen down here, or a nag, whatever you want to call it, pop-up saying you should sign up. And you can if you want, but it, like I say, it is not actually necessary. I think it is helpful to have an account on it. It's very useful. But here you'll see my current profile, and you can set it to show different types of changes, but I would just leave it for all changes. If you don't select that, it defaults to all changes anyway. So you can see I haven't made change for a while. March 24th last year, I changed my pinned tweet. Before that, I think it was just following the Rugby World Cup. I removed the Irish flag and the rugby ball from my account, from my profile information. Then a couple of things where I took out my website address and I put in my Twitter handle instead, and different things like that. So you can see changes over the year. I removed my Instagram account and I put in my website. So lots of different things like this. This was an interesting one because some people noticed that I had changed my work information. So I got people getting in touch with me and saying, oh, have you got a new job? And so on. So you can learn a lot about people just by watching the changes to their Twitter profile information. February 22nd, 2017, verified, and stuff like that.
So I think we should add the caveat that all of these are only doable if the accounts are public, right? If it's set to private, then obviously we wouldn't be able to track all of these.
Yeah, it can only see information that is already out there publicly.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions so far. So I know most people actually tend to watch the recorded sessions. So if you're watching a recording, do take note that we have put up the links to the clinic hour. So you can sign up for the clinic hour if you have any questions. Otherwise, you can also watch the entire playlist of the recording, which I would put up the link as well. Okay, we just got a question.
Okay.
From Adil. So he's asking how to analyze discussions for kinds of topic based on big data on Twitter platform.
Yeah, I'm not sure specifically what you mean by that. Again, the tools that we just mentioned, account analysis, Truthnest, Tweetbeaver, those are the kind of ones that will enable you to dig out a lot of data. But as to how you go about analyzing them, I think it's more a question for somebody who's a statistics and data journalism expert than myself. It's not particularly my field, but you know, what I can help you with is actually getting the information in the first place. And I would definitely encourage you to go and look at account analysis and Truthnest, sorry, and Tweetbeaver, and play around with them. See the kinds of data that you can actually get. What Tweetbeaver is particularly good in that sense because it does allow you to download files that include a whole lot of the data and the information that you look for. You know, how to go about analyzing it? Well, it depends on what you have in mind when you're analyzing it. Are you trying to analyze these accounts for inauthentic behavior? Are you trying to analyze them for coordinated behavior? Are you trying to see, you know, are there people who are working together and so on? It'll be very subjective, and it'll depend on what you're looking for. But definitely, if you have more specifics on that, Adil, please get in touch with me later as well, and maybe we'll be able to tease out an approach.
So if you're based out of Malaysia, there are actually companies that do this. I can actually look it up. I don't have the name off the top of my head right now, but they are actually a Twitter sentiment, I think Twitter sentiment, Twitter analytics company in Malaysia. If you get in touch with me, I could send you the link to them. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, then we'll end the session here today. We'll see you again on next week, Monday, same time at 6 p.m. Hong Kong time. Just do take note that the next week will be the last week, so we only have two more workshops left. Now next week, Monday and Wednesday. So same time, 6 p.m. Hong Kong. So we'll see you next week then. Stay safe. If you're still in a lockdown like I am, then well, enjoy your lockdown and I guess attend more workshops online. Well, take care and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Thank you very much. See you next week.